The Galactic Trade Station. Kepler 442 floated in the void between star systems, a massive structure that served as a neutral meeting ground for dozens of different species. Its gleaming metal corridors bustled with activity as merchants, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy conducted their business. The station's artificial gravity and atmosphere were carefully calibrated to accommodate the widest range of species possible, though some areas required special environmental suits. Lieutenant Commander Vextai of the Hegemony Security Force walked his patrol route through the civilian quarters with practiced efficiency. His forearms moved in a synchronized pattern as he checked his scanner readings, while his compound eyes tracked multiple potential threats simultaneously. The Hegemony had been chosen to provide security for the station precisely because of their reputation for order and discipline. Vextai took pride in maintaining that reputation. The Krillian officer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. Like all members of his species, he had evolved from a hive-mind insectoid race that valued conformity and obedience above all else. Individual thinking was discouraged, and deviation from established protocols was considered a serious character flaw. It was this rigid adherence to rules that made the Krillians such effective peacekeepers in the eyes of the Galactic Council. As Vextai rounded a corner into the main plaza, his compound eyes immediately locked onto an anomaly. A small figure sat alone on one of the benches near the central fountain, seemingly abandoned. The scanner in his upper right hand beeped softly, indicating an unregistered presence. His training kicked in immediately, and he approached with the methodical precision that had been drilled into every hegemony officer. The figure appeared to be a juvenile of some unknown species. It was small, perhaps 3 feet in height, with pale skin and strange fur growing only from the top of its head. The creature wore simple clothing and appeared to be consuming some kind of processed nutrition bar. Most peculiar of all, it seemed completely unafraid, despite being alone in a station filled with potentially dangerous alien species. Vextai activated his translation device and approached the bench. His 4 arms assumed the standard interrogation position as outlined in Hegemony Security Protocol 847B. "Attention, unregistered juvenile entity," he announced in his species' naturally harsh tone. "You are in violation of Station Regulation 23.7, which prohibits unsupervised minors in public areas. Identify your species, point of origin, and responsible guardian immediately." The small creature looked up at him with large, curious eyes. Instead of showing the fear or respect that Vextai expected, the juvenile actually smiled. This expression was unknown to Krillian biology, and the security officer found it unsettling. The creature spoke in a voice that was higher-pitched than adult specimens of most species, but there was something in its tone that Vextai couldn't quite categorize. "Hi there," the juvenile said cheerfully. "I'm Tommy. I'm 7 years old, and I'm from Earth. My mom and dad are in the medical bay getting Dad's arm looked at. He hurt it when we landed, but he said it wasn't serious. They told me to wait here and not to wander off." Vextai's scanner immediately began processing this information. Earth was not in his database of registered worlds, which was highly irregular. The Galactic Council maintained detailed records of all spacefaring civilizations, and any species advanced enough for interstellar travel should have been cataloged long ago. The fact that this Tommy claimed to come from an unknown world was deeply troubling. "Earth does not exist in our galactic registry," Vextai stated firmly. "You are lying about your point of origin, which constitutes a violation of Station Regulation 15.3. Furthermore, abandonment of a juvenile by guardians violates Child Protection Protocol 7 regardless of circumstances. You will accompany me to the security office for proper processing and temporary containment." Tommy's expression changed slightly, and for the first time he seemed confused rather than cheerful. "I'm not lying, sir. Earth is a planet in the Sol system. It's where humans come from. And my parents didn't abandon me. They're just getting Dad's arm fixed. They said they'd be back in an hour." The security officer's compound eyes narrowed as he processed this response. The juvenile was either remarkably well trained in deception or genuinely believed what it was saying. Either way, hegemony protocols were clear. Unregistered entities were to be detained pending proper identification and verification of their claims. The safety and security of the station took precedence over individual comfort. "Your claims cannot be verified through official channels," Vextai announced, his forearms moving into restraint position. "Protocol requires immediate detention for safety assessment and identity confirmation. Resistance will be noted in your file and may result in additional charges. Stand and accompany me now." Tommy remained seated on the bench, but his posture changed subtly. Where before he had been relaxed and open, now he seemed more alert, more focused. It was a change that Vextai's training should have prepared him to recognize, but Krillian military doctrine focused heavily on overwhelming force and superior numbers rather than individual threat assessment. "I don't think that's a good idea," Tommy said quietly. His voice had lost its cheerful tone and taken on something else entirely. "My parents told me to stay here, and that's what I'm going to do. They also taught me that I shouldn't go anywhere with strangers, especially ones who don't listen when I tell them the truth." Vexitai's mandibles clicked together in annoyance. This was exactly the kind of uncooperative behavior that made dealing with unknown species so challenging. In his experience, most juveniles would become properly submissive when confronted with obvious authority. The fact that this creature was continuing to resist suggested either severe psychological damage or defective conditioning by its guardians. "You misunderstand the situation," the officer stated, activating the containment field generator on his utility belt. "This is not a request or a negotiation. Station security protocols supersede any instructions you may have received from your guardians. You will comply with lawful orders or face the consequences of continued resistance." The containment field flickered to life around Tommy, a shimmering energy barrier designed to prevent movement while avoiding physical contact. It was standard procedure for dealing with potentially contaminated or dangerous entities, and Vexitai had used it hundreds of times without incident. Most species found the experience disorienting and immediately ceased resistance. Tommy looked at the energy field surrounding him with interest rather than fear. He reached out and touched the barrier experimentally, his small fingers causing ripples in the energy matrix. "That's pretty neat," he said, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Is this some kind of force field? My dad showed me pictures of stuff like this in his old military books." The security officer's compound eyes widened slightly. The containment field was designed to be painful for most species to touch, serving as both a barrier and a deterrent to resistance. The fact that this juvenile was not only unaffected, but actively investigating the technology, was highly irregular. His scanner indicated that the field was functioning normally, which meant either his instruments were malfunctioning or this creature possessed unusual resistance to energy-based restraints. "The containment field is operating within normal parameters," Vextai announced, more to reassure himself than to inform the juvenile. "Any attempt to breach or disable it will result in immediate escalation to lethal force protocols. Cease your investigation and prepare for transport to the security office." Tommy continued to examine the field for another moment before settling back onto the bench. "Look, I really can't go with you," he said reasonably. "My parents are expecting me to be here when they get back. If I'm gone, they'll worry, and when my parents worry, people tend to get upset. My dad especially doesn't like it when people scare me or try to take me places I'm not supposed to go." Something in the juvenile's tone gave Vexitai pause. There was no fear or uncertainty in the creature's voice, only a matter-of-fact statement that somehow carried more weight than any threat he had encountered in his years of security work. His training told him to proceed with standard protocols, but some instinct he didn't fully understand suggested caution. Your guardian's emotional state is not a security concern, he stated, though with less conviction than before. Station regulations must be enforced regardless of potential personal consequences. The safety of thousands of beings takes precedence over individual preferences. Tommy nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. I get that, he said. Safety is important. That's exactly why I think you should probably let me stay here. My mom says I'm not supposed to talk about some things, but she also says I should warn people if they might accidentally hurt themselves. The security officer found himself genuinely confused by this response. In his experience, threats from juveniles were either empty bluster or desperate pleas for mercy. This creature seemed to be offering some kind of genuine warning, delivered with the calm confidence of an adult discussing weather patterns. It was so far outside his training parameters that he didn't have a proper response protocol. Explain this warning, Vextai demanded, though his tone had become more curious than commanding. What potential harm could result from following standard security procedures with an unregistered juvenile? Tommy was quiet for a long moment, clearly considering his words carefully. Well, he said finally, humans don't really like it when people mess with their kids. And my dad isn't just any human. He's military. Special forces, actually. He spent 20 years fighting in places that make this station look like a playground. Mom says he's retired now. But I've seen what happens when someone threatens his family. The juvenile's voice remained calm and conversational, but something in his words sent an unexpected chill through Vextai's exoskeleton. His scanner was detecting elevated stress hormones in his own system, which was highly irregular. Krillian physiology was specifically designed to remain stable under pressure, yet this small creature's casual words were affecting him in ways he didn't understand. Military service records can be verified through proper channels, Vextai stated, though he found himself checking his scanner readings more frequently than usual. If your guardian possesses legitimate credentials, they will be honored according to interspecies agreements. However, this does not change current protocol requirements for unregistered entities. Tommy shook his head sadly. That's the problem, though. Dad's not registered in your system either. None of us are. Humans are new to this whole galactic community thing. We've been flying around out here for a while, but mostly we keep to ourselves. This is actually our first time visiting a big station like this one. This information struck Vextai like a physical blow. An unregistered spacefaring species was a threat level that exceeded his authority to handle. Such situations required immediate notification of Hegemony High Command and implementation of first contact protocols. The fact that he was dealing with not just an abandoned juvenile but a member of a completely unknown civilization changed everything. You claim your species has achieved interstellar travel without galactic oversight, he stated, his forearms automatically moving to defensive positions. This represents a significant security breach. All spacefaring civilizations are required to register with the Galactic Council before entering neutral space. Your presence here constitutes a violation of the Core Worlds Treaty. Tommy's expression became genuinely apologetic. Yeah, Dad mentioned something about that. He said we were supposed to make contact with someone official, but then he hurt his arm during landing and we had to come straight to the medical bay. He was going to handle all the paperwork stuff after he got fixed up. We really weren't trying to cause any trouble. The security officer's mind raced through the implications of this situation. An unregistered species with interstellar capabilities represented either a massive oversight by galactic intelligence services or a potential threat of unknown magnitude. His protocols required immediate escalation to his superiors, but they also demanded securing the scene until backup arrived. The juvenile seemed cooperative enough, but appearances could be deceiving. Your guardian's injury does not excuse violations of galactic law, Vextai announced, activating his emergency beacon. I am summoning additional security personnel and notifying High Command of this situation. You will remain in containment until proper authorities can assess the threat level represented by your species' presence. Tommy sighed and leaned back against the bench. I really wish you hadn't done that, he said quietly. Dad specifically said he wanted to handle this quietly and officially. He's not going to be happy when he finds out security got involved before he could do the paperwork. Something in the juvenile's tone made Vextai's compound eyes dart nervously around the plaza. The space was still filled with civilian traffic, but he found himself scanning for potential threats with unusual intensity. His training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was suddenly screaming that he had made a terrible mistake. Security protocols exist for the protection of all station inhabitants, he stated, though his voice carried less conviction than before. Your guardian's preferences cannot supersede established safety procedures. Any displeasure on their part will be addressed through proper diplomatic channels. Tommy nodded understandingly, but his expression had become genuinely sympathetic. You're just doing your job, and I get that. It's not your fault that nobody told you about humans, but you should probably know that my dad takes family protection really seriously. When he finds out that someone put his kid in an energy cage and called for backup, he's going to respond accordingly. The containment field suddenly flickered and died. Vextai's scanner showed no mechanical failure, and his equipment indicated full power to all systems. Yet somehow, the energy barrier that should have been strong enough to contain most known species had simply ceased to function. Tommy stood up from the bench and brushed off his simple clothes as if nothing unusual had happened. How did you do that? Vextai demanded, his forearms reaching for additional restraint devices. Containment fields cannot be disrupted without specialized equipment or extreme physical force. Explain this breach immediately. Tommy shrugged apologetically. Dad taught me some stuff about electronics. He said it might come in handy someday, but really, I didn't want to break anything. I just nudged a few connections so it would turn off cleanly. Your equipment should be fine. The security officer's scanner confirmed that all his devices were indeed functioning normally, despite the impossible breach they had just witnessed. His mind struggled to process how a juvenile of any species could possess the knowledge and capability to disable hegemony military technology with such casual ease. Such ability suggested a level of technological sophistication that should have put this human species on the Galactic Council's priority monitoring list. Tampering with security equipment constitutes a Class C felony under station regulations, Vextai announced, though his tone had become noticeably less confident. You are now considered a security threat requiring enhanced containment protocols. Additional charges will be filed for destruction of official property. Tommy's expression became genuinely confused. But I didn't destroy anything. All your stuff still works fine. I just turned off the cage thing because it was making me feel claustrophobic. Dad says I need to practice dealing with confined spaces, but he also says there's no point in staying uncomfortable when you don't have to be. The sound of approaching footsteps made both of them turn toward the medical bay entrance. A tall figure was walking across the plaza with purposeful strides, and even from a distance, Vextai could see that this was no ordinary civilian. The newcomer moved with the fluid confidence of a trained predator, and every line of his posture suggested contained violence ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. Tommy's face lit up with genuine joy. "Dad!" he called out, waving enthusiastically. "Over here! This nice officer was keeping me company, but I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding about paperwork." The approaching figure's pace increased noticeably, and Vextai found himself automatically checking his weapon systems. His compound eyes tracked the newcomer's movement pattern, noting the way he scanned the environment for threats while never losing focus on his apparent destination. This was clearly a being with extensive combat experience, and every instinct the security officer possessed warned him that the situation was about to become significantly more complicated. The man who approached their bench was of average height for his species, but there was nothing average about his presence. His hair was cut short in a style that Vextai recognized from military databases, and his clothing was simple but practical. Most unsettling of all were his eyes, pale blue orbs that seemed to catalog every detail of the scene while revealing nothing of their owner's thoughts. "Tommy," the human said calmly, "I thought we agreed you were going to stay on the bench until I got back." His voice carried no anger, but there was an undertone of authority that made Vextai's exoskeleton tingle with nervous energy. "I did stay on the bench, Dad," Tommy replied cheerfully. "But this officer thought I was lost or something, and he wanted to take me to his security office. I told him you were coming back, but he said there were regulations and stuff." The human's pale eyes shifted to Vextai, and the security officer found himself under scrutiny that felt like being examined by a targeting computer. There was no hostility in that gaze, but there was an assessment taking place that went far beyond casual observation. Vextai realized he was being evaluated as a potential threat by someone with extensive experience in making such determinations. "I see," the human said quietly. "And what exactly did these regulations require?" Vextai's training kicked in, though he found himself speaking with less confidence than usual. "Station regulations prohibit unsupervised juveniles in public areas," he stated. "Additionally, your species is not registered in galactic databases, which constitutes a violation of the Core Worlds Treaty. I was following proper protocols for securing unregistered entities pending identification verification." The human nodded thoughtfully, and somehow this calm acceptance was more unsettling than any display of anger would have been. "I can understand your position," he said reasonably. "You're doing your job according to the information you have available, but I think there might be some context that would help clarify the situation." Something in the man's tone made Vextai realize that he was about to learn exactly what kind of mistake he had made. The emergency beacon he had activated was still broadcasting, which meant additional security forces were en route to deal with what they believed to be a standard containment situation. But nothing about this encounter felt standard anymore, and the security officer found himself wondering if he should cancel the backup request while he still could. The human extended his right hand in what Vextai recognized as a greeting gesture common to several humanoid species. "Colonel Marcus Chen, retired, Earth Defense Force Special Operations Command. This is my son Tommy, and my wife Sarah is finishing up some paperwork at the medical bay. We're here under Article 15 of the Galactic First Contact Protocols, though I admit we're running a bit behind on the formal notification process." Vextai's compound eyes widened as he processed this information. The Galactic First Contact Protocols were among the most classified documents in the Hegemony database, known only to senior military officials and intelligence specialists. The fact that this human not only knew of their existence but was citing specific articles suggested a level of galactic awareness that contradicted everything about their supposed unknown species status. "First Contact Protocols are restricted documents," Vextai stated cautiously. "Knowledge of their contents requires security clearance level 7 or above. Explain how an unregistered species gained access to classified hegemony materials." Colonel Chen's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his pale eyes that made the security officer's instincts scream warnings. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for approximately 37 years, the human said calmly. During that time, we've had several opportunities to make formal contact, but our leadership preferred to observe and learn before announcing our presence. This visit represents our first attempt at official diplomatic relations." The implications of this statement struck Vextai like a physical blow. 37 years of undetected surveillance meant this species possessed technology capable of intercepting and decoding the most secure communication networks in the galaxy. Such capabilities would require not just advanced technology, but an understanding of multiple alien encryption protocols that had taken the combined efforts of dozens of species to develop. Unauthorized surveillance of galactic communications is considered an act of espionage under the Unified Security Treaty, Vextai announced, though his voice carried uncertainty. If your claims are accurate, your species has been committing systematic violations of interstellar law for over 3 decades. Colonel Chen nodded acknowledgement without showing any sign of concern. I understand your position and you're technically correct about the legal violations. However, I think you'll find that Earth's political leaders were operating under the principle of informed caution. When you're entering a community of dozens of spacefaring civilizations, it pays to understand the neighborhood before you knock on anyone's door. Tommy had been listening to this conversation with the patient attention of a child accustomed to adult discussions involving complex topics. "Dad," he said quietly, "the nice officer called for backup before you got here. I think more security people are coming." The human's expression didn't change, but Vextai noticed a subtle shift in his posture that suggested immediate combat readiness. It was a transformation so smooth and natural that it seemed unconscious, yet the security officer's training recognized it as the response of someone with extensive battlefield experience. Colonel Chen was preparing for potential violence while maintaining perfect emotional control. "I see," the human said softly. "How many additional personnel, and what's their estimated time of arrival?" Vextai found himself answering the question before fully considering the implications of providing tactical information to a potential threat. Standard protocol requires a 4-being response team for unregistered entity situations. Estimated arrival time is 6 minutes from initial beacon activation. 6 minutes, Colonel Chen repeated thoughtfully. That should be enough time to resolve this misunderstanding before things become complicated. Tommy, I need you to stay close to me and do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. This isn't a game anymore. The boy's cheerful demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by the focused attention of a young soldier receiving orders from a superior officer. "Yes, sir," he said simply, moving to stand at his father's right side in a position that would provide optimal protection while maintaining freedom of movement. Vextai watched this transformation with growing unease. The casual, friendly juvenile had become something else entirely, still recognizably young, but now displaying the disciplined behavior of someone with military training. The fact that a child of this species could make such a transition so smoothly suggested cultural attitudes toward warfare that were deeply troubling. "Your juvenile appears to have received combat conditioning," the security officer observed. "Military training of minors violates the Geneva Convention on Child Protection Rights." Colonel Chen's pale eyes fixed on Vextai with laser intensity. "The Geneva Convention is an Earth document that has no jurisdiction in galactic space," he said quietly. "And Tommy's training consists of basic situational awareness and emergency protocols that any responsible parent would teach their child. The fact that you interpret preparedness as militarization says more about your assumptions than our methods." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the plaza as the backup security team rounded the corner from the main corridor. Vextai felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as he recognized the distinctive red and black armor of a hegemony tactical response squad. These were veteran officers with experience in handling dangerous situations, but something about the human's calm confidence suggested that additional firepower might not be the advantage it should have been. The team leader, a massive Krillian named Sergeant Thexvar, approached with the measured precision of a seasoned warrior. His 3 subordinates spread out in a standard containment formation, their weapons remaining holstered but easily accessible. Each team member stood over 8 feet tall, their chitinous armor gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. "Lieutenant Commander Vextai," Sergeant Thexvar announced in the clipped tones of military efficiency. Situation report on Code Yellow Security Alert. Vextai straightened to attention, grateful for the arrival of superior authority. Sergeant, we have an unregistered species claiming Earth origin. The adult male identifies as former military personnel and admits to 37 years of unauthorized galactic surveillance. The juvenile demonstrated ability to disable containment equipment without tools. Both subjects are currently unrestrained and potentially dangerous. Sergeant Thexavar's compound eyes focused on Colonel Chen and Tommy, conducting the same threat assessment that Vexatai had performed earlier. However, the sergeant's evaluation carried the weight of significant combat experience, and his conclusions were notably different from those of his subordinate. Human species, he stated after a moment of observation. Bipedal, apparent homeworld gravity between 0.8 and 0.9 galactic standard. Adult male shows indicators of extensive military training, possibly special operations background. Combat threat level assessed as moderate to high. Juvenile threat level unknown, but potentially significant given demonstrated technical capabilities. Colonel Chen listened to this assessment with professional interest, as if he were attending a briefing rather than being evaluated as a potential threat. Sergeant Thexvar, he said politely, I appreciate your thoroughness. Your threat evaluation is reasonably accurate, though I think you might be underestimating a few factors. The fact that the human had correctly identified the sergeant's name and rank from his uniform markings was impressive but not alarming. However, his casual mention of underestimated factors sent warning signals through every member of the security team. Beings who felt confident enough to suggest that trained military personnel had missed important details were either exceptionally dangerous or catastrophically delusional. Explain these factors, Sergeant Thexvar commanded, his four arms shifting to a ready position that would allow rapid access to his weapons. Any additional information relevant to threat assessment should be provided immediately. Colonel Chen glanced around the plaza, noting the positions of all security personnel and the various exit routes available. Well, he said thoughtfully, for starters, you're assuming this is a random encounter with an isolated family group. That's understandable given the information you have, but it's not entirely accurate. Tommy looked up at his father with questioning eyes, silently asking for permission to speak. Colonel Chen nodded almost imperceptibly, and the boy stepped forward slightly. My mom's not really doing paperwork at the medical bay, Tommy said matter-of-factly. She's a communications specialist, and she's been in contact with our ship since Dad's arm got hurt. They know exactly where we are and what's happening. Vexatai felt his exoskeleton tingle with nervous energy as the implications of this revelation sank in. If these humans had been maintaining active communication with an orbital vessel, then every word spoken in the plaza had potentially been monitored and recorded. More importantly, any hostile action taken against the family would be immediately detected by unknown allies with unknown capabilities. You claim to have a ship in system, Sergeant Thexvar stated, his tone becoming notably more cautious. Our traffic control sensors have detected no unauthorized vessels. Explain this discrepancy. Colonel Chen's expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of what might have been amusement in his pale eyes. Your sensors are impressive pieces of technology, Sergeant, but they're designed to detect ships using propulsion and energy signatures that conform to known galactic standards. Human engineering takes a somewhat different approach to spacecraft design. The security team leader's mandibles clicked together in a gesture that indicated deep thought. Stealth technology capable of defeating hegemony sensors represented a significant tactical advantage that could upset the balance of power throughout the galaxy. If this human species possessed such capabilities, their appearance at the trade station might represent something far more significant than a simple first contact situation. Describe your vessel's specifications, Sergeant Thexvar commanded. Hull composition, propulsion type, crew complement, and defensive capabilities. This information is required for station security assessment. Colonel Chen shook his head politely. I'm afraid that information is classified under Earth military protocols. However, I can tell you that our ship poses no threat to this station or its inhabitants, assuming no hostile action is taken against our personnel. We're here for peaceful diplomatic contact, nothing more. The sergeant's compound eyes narrowed as he processed this refusal to cooperate with official security requirements. Failure to provide vessel specifications constitutes a violation of station security protocols. Your diplomatic intentions are irrelevant if you cannot comply with basic safety requirements. All unregistered ships must submit to inspection before personnel are permitted aboard station. Tommy tugged gently at his father's sleeve, drawing the human's attention. "Dad," he whispered, "should I tell them about Captain Rodriguez?" Colonel Chen considered this question for a moment before nodding. "Go ahead, son. I think our new friends should understand the complete picture." The boy looked up at Sergeant Thexvar with the same cheerful expression he had shown earlier, though now it carried undertones that made the security officer decidedly uncomfortable. "Captain Rodriguez is the commander of our ship," Tommy explained helpfully. "She used to work with Dad in special operations, but now she runs the protection detail for diplomatic missions. She's really good at her job, and she doesn't like it when people threaten her passengers." Vextai's scanner began detecting elevated stress hormones from every member of the security team as the implications of this information registered. A military vessel with hostile capabilities was apparently observing the situation, commanded by someone with special operations experience and a personal investment in protecting the human family. Any aggressive action taken against the civilians could potentially trigger a response from unknown forces with unknown capabilities. "You are implying that armed forces are monitoring this encounter," Sergeant Thexvar stated carefully. "Such threats against station security constitute grounds for immediate detention under Emergency Protocol 7. Colonel Chen's expression hardened slightly, and for the first time, Vextai caught a glimpse of the predator that lurked beneath the human's calm exterior. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something important. What I've described is not a threat. It's a statement of fact. Captain Rodriguez isn't monitoring this conversation because she wants to cause trouble. She's monitoring it because her job is to ensure that her passengers return safely to Earth." The plaza had gradually emptied of civilian traffic as other species recognized the signs of a developing security situation and moved away from potential danger. This left the two humans surrounded by 4 heavily armed Krillian security officers in an increasingly isolated environment. Yet somehow, it was the security team that seemed outnumbered. "Your captain's protective instincts are noted," Sergeant Thexvar said carefully. "However, station regulations cannot be waived based on external pressure. All visitors must comply with established protocols regardless of their military background or orbital support." Tommy looked around at the empty plaza, and then back at the security team. "You guys really should consider letting us go through the proper diplomatic channels," he said seriously. "Dad and Mom know all the right procedures for first contact, and they were planning to do everything officially. But if you keep treating us like criminals, Captain Rodriguez is going to start thinking that maybe this station isn't as friendly as we hoped." Vextai found himself speaking without conscious thought. "What would happen if Captain Rodriguez reached that conclusion?" he asked, immediately regretting the question. Colonel Chen answered with the same matter-of-fact tone his son had been using throughout the encounter. "Well," he said thoughtfully, "she'd probably classify this as a hostile first contact situation. That would trigger a completely different set of protocols, including immediate notification of Earth Command and deployment of additional assets to ensure our safe extraction." The security team exchanged glances that carried volumes of unspoken communication. The possibility of accidentally initiating hostilities with an unknown species possessing advanced stealth technology was exactly the kind of scenario that ended military careers and potentially started interstellar wars. Yet their protocols clearly required continued detention of the unregistered entities until proper identification could be established. Additional assets, Sergeant Thexvar repeated slowly. Define the nature and scope of these assets. Tommy grinned with genuine enthusiasm. Oh, that part's really cool, he said excitedly. Earth has been sending exploration ships throughout this part of the galaxy for years. There are probably a dozen human vessels within a few days' travel of here, all equipped with really neat technology that nobody else knows about yet. If Captain Rodriguez calls for help, things could get really interesting really fast. The implications of this casual revelation struck the security team like a collective blow. A dozen undetected ships within rapid response range suggested not just advanced stealth technology, but a coordinated intelligence operation that had been monitoring galactic activities for years. The humans weren't just an unknown species making first contact. They were potentially an advanced civilization that had been gathering information while remaining completely invisible to galactic authorities. You describe a systematic intelligence operation spanning multiple star systems, Sergeant Thexvar stated, his voice carrying the careful control of someone trying to maintain professional composure while processing genuinely alarming information. Such activities constitute espionage on a scale that threatens galactic security. Colonel Chen nodded acknowledgement of this assessment. From your perspective, I can understand how our activities might seem threatening, he said reasonably. But consider the alternative. When humanity achieved interstellar travel, we found ourselves facing a galaxy full of established civilizations with unknown intentions. Would you have advised us to announce our presence without first understanding what we were walking into? Vextai found himself considering this question from angles his training had never covered. The Krillian approach to expansion had always involved overwhelming force and immediate domination of less advanced species. The concept of voluntary restraint for the purpose of information gathering was so foreign to his culture that he struggled to categorize it properly. Caution is understandable, he admitted reluctantly. However, extended surveillance without declaration violates the fundamental principles of interstellar law. Your species chose deception over legitimate diplomatic contact. Tommy looked genuinely confused by this criticism. But we're here now, he pointed out logically. Dad and Mom came to do the diplomatic stuff properly. They were just going to get Dad's arm fixed first and then go through all the official procedures. If you guys hadn't decided to arrest me for sitting on a bench, everything would have worked out fine. The truth of this statement was undeniable, and it cast the entire situation in a different light. The humans had indeed been attempting to follow proper procedures before the security intervention escalated the situation beyond their control. What had begun as a routine detention of an unsupervised juvenile had transformed into a potential interstellar incident through a series of misunderstandings and protocol applications. The juvenile was unregistered and unsupervised, Sergeant Thexvar stated, though his tone had become defensive rather than authoritative. Security protocols required intervention regardless of the family's long-term intentions. Colonel Chen's expression became genuinely sympathetic. Sergeant, I want you to know that I don't blame you or your people for this situation. You were doing your jobs according to the information you had available. But I need you to understand that we're past the point where standard security protocols can resolve this peacefully. A new voice cut through the tension from the direction of the medical bay. Marcus, what's the situation over there? The speaker was a woman approaching with the same fluid confidence that Colonel Chen had displayed, though her movement pattern suggested a different type of military specialization. Sarah, Colonel Chen called back, we're having a discussion with station security about proper first contact procedures. I think they might benefit from hearing the official version of our diplomatic credentials. The woman who approached was clearly another human, though her bearing suggested command experience rather than special operations training. She carried a small device that was scanning the environment continuously, and her pale eyes tracked every member of the security team with professional assessment. "Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth Diplomatic Corps," she announced as she joined the group. "I apologize for the delay, but I was coordinating with Captain Rodriguez about the change in our situation. She wanted me to let you know that she's classified this encounter as a potential Code Orange scenario." Vextai's scanner immediately began searching for the meaning of Code Orange in available databases, but found no reference to human military classifications. The fact that their ship's captain was apparently escalating the threat level of the encounter did not bode well for peaceful resolution. "Explain Code Orange classification," Sergeant Thexvar demanded, his forearms moving closer to his weapon systems. Dr. Chen consulted her scanner device before answering. "Code Orange indicates a first contact situation that has deviated significantly from planned parameters," she explained professionally. "It triggers enhanced monitoring protocols and places rapid response assets on standby for immediate deployment if required. Captain Rodriguez is hoping it won't be necessary, but she wanted everyone to understand the current status." Tommy looked up at his mother with obvious pride. "Mom, I told them about the other ships and about how Captain Rodriguez doesn't like it when people threaten us. I think they're starting to understand that this might be bigger than they thought." Dr. Chen smiled at her son before addressing the security team. "My son has a tendency to simplify complex situations, but his basic assessment is accurate. Earth Command has been monitoring this encounter since Marcus activated his emergency beacon. If we can't resolve this situation diplomatically, there will be consequences that go far beyond this station." The security team found themselves facing a complete reversal of their tactical situation. What had begun as a simple detention of unregistered civilians had evolved into a potential confrontation with an unknown military force possessing advanced technology and unknown capabilities. Every protocol in their training emphasized the importance of avoiding exactly this type of scenario. Sergeant Thexvar made a decision that his training manual had never prepared him for. "Dr. Chen," he said carefully, "I am requesting permission to escalate this matter to Station Commander Veltharix. This situation has exceeded the scope of standard security protocols, and diplomatic resolution may be more appropriate than continued enforcement action." Dr. Sarah Chen nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of reasonable thinking that makes first contact successful, Sergeant. I think Commander Veltharix will find our credentials quite comprehensive once he has an opportunity to review them properly." Tommy looked around at the security team with genuine curiosity. "Are you guys going to get in trouble for this?" he asked. "Because if you are, my dad could probably explain to your commander that you were just doing your jobs. It's not your fault that nobody told you humans were coming." Vextai found himself oddly touched by the juveniles' concern for their welfare. Throughout this entire encounter, both human children and adults had maintained a consistent attitude of respectful cooperation despite being threatened, detained, and interrogated. Such behavior was almost unknown among species that possessed significant military capabilities. "Your concern is appreciated," he told Tommy sincerely. "However, hegemony officers are responsible for the consequences of their decisions regardless of external circumstances. If errors were made, they will be addressed through proper channels." Colonel Chen stepped forward slightly, and his movement carried the subtle authority of someone accustomed to command. "Sergeant, before we involve Commander Veltharix, I think there's something you should know about Earth's approach to interstellar relations. We're not here to challenge anyone's authority or disrupt existing power structures. Our goal is peaceful integration into the galactic community, with mutual benefit for all parties involved." The security team leader's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he processed this statement. "Your stated intentions are noted," he said carefully. "However, your species' demonstrated capabilities suggest potential for significant disruption, whether intentional or not. Advanced stealth technology and intelligence operations could upset established balances of power throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chen consulted her scanner device again before responding. You're absolutely right to be concerned about that, Sergeant, which is why Earth Command spent considerable time developing protocols that would minimize disruption while maximizing mutual benefit. We have some things to offer that we think the galactic community will find quite valuable. Before anyone could ask what she meant by that statement, the plaza was suddenly filled with a low harmonic tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound was not unpleasant, but it carried undertones that made every being present acutely aware that they were experiencing something beyond normal parameters. Tommy grinned with obvious excitement. "Oh, cool. Captain Rodriguez is using the communication array. You guys are about to meet her properly." A shimmering distortion appeared in the air above the central fountain, gradually resolving into a three-dimensional projection of exceptional clarity. The figure that materialized was another human, this one wearing what appeared to be a military uniform of unfamiliar design. Her bearing carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command in life-or-death situations. "Good afternoon, everyone," the projection said in a voice that carried perfectly despite its obviously artificial nature. "I'm Captain Maria Rodriguez, commanding officer of the Earth vessel Endeavor. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but circumstances required direct communication." Vextai's scanner went wild as it attempted to analyze the projection technology being displayed. According to his instruments, the hologram was being generated without any local projector equipment, somehow transmitted directly from an orbital source that his sensors still could not detect. The technological implications were staggering. "Captain Rodriguez," Sergeant Thexvar said, recovering his composure with impressive speed. "You are in command of an unregistered vessel operating within hegemony space. Explain your intentions and submit to standard identification procedures." The holographic captain smiled with genuine warmth. "Sergeant, I understand your position, and I want to assure you that Earth has no hostile intentions toward this station or any of its inhabitants. However, I need you to understand that the situation has progressed beyond the point where standard procedures can be effectively applied." Tommy raised his hand as if he were in a classroom asking a question. "Captain Rodriguez, can you show them the other ships? I think they'd find that really interesting." The captain's expression became thoughtful. "That's not a bad idea, Tommy. Gentlemen, would you mind looking up at the observation windows along the station's upper levels?" Every member of the security team instinctively followed her suggestion, turning their compound eyes toward the massive, transparent panels that provided a view of the surrounding space. What they saw there made Vextai's exoskeleton tingle with shock and disbelief. Ships were materializing throughout the local space around the station. Not one or two vessels, but dozens of them, appearing as if emerging from some form of advanced cloaking technology. Each ship was sleek and obviously designed for both speed and combat effectiveness, though their actual size was difficult to determine without proper sensor readings. "Holy molting season," one of the junior security officers whispered, using a Krillian expression that was roughly equivalent to a human saying a prayer. Captain Rodriguez's projection nodded understanding of their reaction. "Earth maintains a rapid response fleet in this sector, primarily for exploration and emergency support. When Dr. Chen activated our diplomatic protocols, these vessels moved into position to provide assistance if required. I want to emphasize that this is not a threat display. It's simply a precautionary measure to ensure the safety of our diplomatic team." Sergeant Thexvar stared at the fleet surrounding the station with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of the universe had just been completely overturned. "How many vessels?" he asked quietly. 43 ships currently," the captain replied matter-of-factly. "Though additional assets are en route if the situation continues to escalate. Earth Command takes the safety of our people very seriously, especially during first contact situations. Dr. Chen stepped forward to address the security team. Sergeant, I want you to understand that this display is not intended to intimidate you or your people, but Earth's leadership felt it was important that our first contact be conducted from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. We've observed too many examples throughout galactic history of new species being exploited or mistreated by more established civilizations. Vextai found his voice, though it took considerable effort. You have been studying galactic history, he said slowly. For how long, and in how much detail? Colonel Chen answered this question. Our intelligence services have been monitoring galactic communications, trade patterns, and political developments for 37 years, he said. During that time, we've observed 14 different instances of newly contacted species being subjected to unfavorable treatment by the galactic community. We decided to avoid that fate. The implications of this revelation struck the security team like a collective physical blow. 37 years of detailed intelligence gathering meant the humans knew everything. Every political alliance, every trade agreement, every military capability, and every strategic weakness of every major galactic power. They had entered the interstellar community not as naive newcomers, but as a fully informed civilization with comprehensive understanding of their potential allies and enemies. You possess detailed intelligence on all major galactic civilizations, Sergeant Thexvar stated, his tone carefully controlled. Such information could be used to manipulate political situations, trade negotiations, and military conflicts throughout the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez's projection nodded acknowledgement of this concern. You're absolutely right, Sergeant. The information Earth possesses could indeed be used for those purposes, which is exactly why we're approaching first contact through proper diplomatic channels with full disclosure of our capabilities. We want to be partners in the galactic community, not puppeteers operating from the shadows. Tommy looked up at the security team with the same helpful expression he had worn throughout the encounter. Plus, he added, Dad says that trying to control other people is a lot more work than just being honest with them. It's easier to make friends when everyone knows where they stand. Dr. Chen smiled at her son's simplified but accurate assessment. Tommy's right, though perhaps he's understating the complexity of the situation. Earth Command spent considerable time analyzing the most successful examples of galactic integration, and honest cooperation consistently produced better long-term results than deception or manipulation. Vextai's mind raced as he tried to process the full scope of what was being revealed. The humans weren't just technologically advanced. They had approached interstellar contact with the systematic thoroughness of a species that understood the stakes involved. Their apparent innocence and friendly cooperation masked decades of careful planning and strategic preparation. Your species has been preparing for this encounter for decades, he said slowly. Everything we have witnessed, your family's presence here, the technological demonstrations, even this conversation, has been planned in advance. Colonel Chen shook his head. Not planned exactly, but we did develop protocols for a wide range of possible first contact scenarios. Sarah and I volunteered for this mission because our combined backgrounds in military operations and diplomacy made us good candidates for handling unexpected complications. Tommy tugged at his father's sleeve. Dad, should I tell them about the really cool stuff? Both parents exchanged a look that carried volumes of silent communication. Finally, Dr. Chen nodded. Go ahead, son. I think our new friends deserve to understand the complete picture. The boy turned to face the security team with obvious enthusiasm. The thing is, he said happily, humans are really good at understanding how things work. Not just technology stuff, but patterns and systems and how different pieces fit together. When we started watching everyone out here, We didn't just learn about your ships and weapons. We learned how to make better ones. Captain Rodriguez's projection became more serious. What Tommy is trying to explain is that Earth's technology base advanced significantly during our observation period. We didn't simply copy existing galactic technology. We analyzed the underlying principles and developed improved versions. The ships you see around this station represent engineering capabilities that exceed current galactic standards. Sergeant Thexvar felt his worldview continuing to crumble as the true scope of the situation became clear. The humans hadn't just achieved interstellar travel, they had surpassed the technological capabilities of civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Their 43-ship fleet represented a military force that could potentially challenge any single galactic power. You claim technological superiority over established galactic civilizations, he said carefully. Such advantages could be used to dominate or conquer existing territories. Colonel Chen's expression became genuinely sympathetic. Sergeant, I understand your concern, and it's exactly the kind of thinking that guided our approach to this situation. Yes, Earth possesses certain technological advantages, but consider what we could have accomplished if our intentions were hostile. The human gestured toward the observation windows where the fleet remained visible. If we wanted to conquer territory or dominate other species, would we have announced our presence through a diplomatic mission? Would we have brought our families along? Would we be having this conversation at all? Or would you simply have awakened to find your space controlled by unknown forces? The logic of this argument was undeniable, and it highlighted something that Vextai's training should have prepared him to recognize much earlier. Species with genuinely hostile intentions didn't typically announce themselves through diplomatic channels while their children consumed nutrition bars in public plazas. The humans' approach to first contact was entirely consistent with their stated peaceful intentions. Your points are valid, Sergeant Thexvar acknowledged reluctantly. However, the existence of superior technology represents an inherent threat, regardless of stated intentions. Political situations change, and today's peaceful species could become tomorrow's conquerors. Dr. Chen consulted her scanner device one final time before responding. Which brings us to the real reason Earth chose this approach to first contact, she said. We're not interested in being the dominant power in this region of space. We want to be the stabilizing influence that prevents any single civilization from achieving that dominance. Tommy grinned at the security team. Mom means we want to be the referees, he explained helpfully. You know, make sure everyone plays fair and nobody gets to be mean to the smaller kids. Dad says that's what humans are really good at, keeping bullies from picking on people who can't defend themselves. This casual description of Earth's strategic intentions sent a chill through Vextai's exoskeleton that had nothing to do with station temperature. The humans weren't seeking to become another galactic power competing for territory and resources. They were positioning themselves as the ultimate arbiters of interstellar conflict, possessing the technology and knowledge necessary to intervene in any situation throughout the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez's projection seemed to sense the security team's growing understanding of the situation. Gentlemen, she said gently, I want to emphasize that Earth's role as a stabilizing influence would be conducted through cooperation and consultation with existing galactic institutions. We're not interested in imposing our will unilaterally. We want to work within established frameworks while providing additional capabilities that benefit everyone. Sergeant Thexvar managed to find his voice. And if existing galactic institutions resist your stabilizing influence? The captain's expression remained friendly, but there was something in her pale eyes that reminded every member of the security team that they were speaking to a military officer with access to capabilities that exceeded their ability to resist. Then we would have to consider alternative approaches to achieving galactic stability, she said quietly. But Earth Command remains optimistic that reasonable beings can find reasonable solutions to complex problems. That's why we're starting with diplomatic contact rather than more direct methods. Dr. Chen stepped forward to address the security team directly. "Sergeant, I think it would be beneficial if we could conclude this encounter by arranging a formal meeting between Earth's diplomatic team and Commander Veltharix. We have comprehensive credentials and proposals that we believe will be of great interest to the Galactic Council." Vextai realized that he was witnessing the conclusion of one of the most significant events in galactic history. The humans had just announced their presence, demonstrated their capabilities, and outlined their intentions with a combination of overwhelming force and careful diplomacy that left their audience with no rational choice but cooperation. "I will contact Commander Veltharix immediately," Sergeant Thexvar announced. "This situation clearly requires command-level attention and diplomatic expertise that exceeds my authority." Tommy looked around at the security team with genuine appreciation. "You guys have been really professional about this whole thing," he said seriously. "I know it probably wasn't what you expected when you started your shift today, but you handled it really well. Dad always says that good people will do the right thing when they understand the situation clearly." Colonel Chen nodded agreement with his son's assessment. "Sergeant, I want you to know that Earth's diplomatic corps will be recommending commendations for you and your team. You were faced with an unprecedented situation and maintained both professionalism and good judgment throughout. That kind of leadership is exactly what makes peaceful first contact possible." Captain Rodriguez's projection began to fade as she concluded the communication. "Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure meeting you all. I look forward to working with Hegemony security forces in the future. Please inform Commander Veltharix that formal diplomatic credentials will be transmitted within the hour, along with preliminary proposals for mutual cooperation agreements." As the holographic figure disappeared, the plaza fell into thoughtful silence. The human family stood together in the same casual grouping they had maintained throughout the encounter, while the security team processed the full implications of what they had just witnessed. Finally, Sergeant Thexvar activated his communication device. "Command Center, this is Sergeant Thexvar. I need immediate connection to Commander Veltharix for a priority Alpha situation report. We have confirmed first contact with a previously unknown spacefaring civilization possessing advanced technological capabilities and immediate diplomatic intentions." The response crackled through his communicator almost instantly. "Sergeant, this is Commander Veltharix. Priority Alpha confirmed. Stand by for immediate transport to Command Center with all involved parties. Full diplomatic protocols are now in effect." Dr. Chen gathered her family with efficient movements. "Well," she said cheerfully, "it looks like we're finally going to get those formal credentials processed. Tommy, make sure you have your nutrition bar. This could take a while." Tommy grinned at the security team one final time. "Thanks for keeping me company, guys. This was a lot more fun than just sitting on a bench waiting for my parents." As the transport arrived to carry them to the command center, Vextai realized that his simple patrol shift had just become the opening chapter of a new era in galactic history. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The only question remaining was whether the galaxy was ready for what Earth had to offer.